Hey everybody, and welcome back to my channel where today we are going to be discussing where all my books came from in 2021. So that is going to include all the books that I read, DNF'd, things that I brought in but haven't read yet. And we are going to be talking about exactly how much money I spent procuring books as well as how much I saved by getting books for free. All the numbers. Um, I got this idea from a video that Mari over at My Name is Marinez did, I think at the end of 2020, maybe the beginning of 2021, where she looked at all the money she spent on books and really went in depth on those numbers. Exactly what services she was paying for, and did she actually read the books? Was it worth it? A lot of really, really good information. And so I took that idea and made it applicable to me because I do get a lot of books for free. And I really wanted to do this specifically because BookTube has a conversation that we regularly have, and that is consumerism and materialism within the BookTube community. But this is a conversation where we haven't really been productive talking about it. And part of that reason, I think, is because we don't have a lot of good data about people's spending habits. And so it's pretty understandable why we don't have a ton of good data because this is a pretty sensitive topic. A lot of people would feel really uncomfortable even talking about this with friends, let alone, the entire internet. But I think without that data, we can't have a good, productive conversation because we just don't see, we can't talk about trends within the wider community because we don't have the data to be able to know what those trends are. And so I think it is a really good thing to have that information out there. And I also do think it's just in general a really interesting topic. And so I decided that I would put my data out there as well. Now, some people are doing this to some extent. Like, I know that people, when they haul books, they will frequently say, I got this from a publisher, I got this from a bookstore, a friend gave this to me, whatever. But frequently there is no numbers attached to it, like how much money was spent. And a lot of times that's not aggregated at the end of the year into something kind of meaningful. You know what I mean? There are some people that do aggregate it. I know that Bethany over at Beautifully Bookish Bethany and Mara over at Books Like Whoa have aggregated some of this and do talk about it in their stats videos, but there's not a whole lot of depth into those numbers and really like breaking it out according to like I got this from a bookstore or whatever. And so again, I think that those are steps in the right direction, but it's not kind of the level of detail that I think we should be at. So, but I did want to acknowledge that some people are doing versions of this. So before we jump into the actual numbers, real quick note, I would like to have a conversation about this. I would love to have comments. I would just ask that you be kind in the comments because obviously talking about money, talking about spending habits is sensitive and people get very sensitive about it. I'm choosing to share these numbers because I think it's good information to put out into the world, but like, please be kind. That's really what it is. So let's jump right into the numbers. So we are going to be talking about a total of 197 books. Now this does include all the books I read, all the books that I DNF'd, all the books that I hauled but did not get to yet, as well as the one book that I hauled and have subsequently unhauled in 2021. So the breakdown of these numbers is I read 119 of these books, or about 60%. I DNF'd 44 of them, or about 22%. I have not yet read 33 of them, or about 17%. And again, there was one book that I hauled and then subsequently unhauled in 2021. There are two general categories that I put books into. Did I spend money on them or did I get them for free? So purchased or free. And of the 197 books, 152 or about 77% of them were free in some way. I didn't spend any additional money in 2021 on them. which I think is excellent. And that means that I did spend money on 45 books, or about 23%. This percentage breakdown, I think, is pretty good. It is a little bit higher than what I was expecting for free books. And I will say that I think that I think my happy place might be purchasing a few less books, but generally speaking, this is right where I want to be. Now, when I looked at the books that I purchased, I found that they fell into three basic categories. The first one is short stories that I got from being a Patreon member. So I'm a patron for Shannon McGuire, and I don't do it for the short stories. I actually do it just to support her because I want her to continue writing as long as she has ideas and the inclination to write them down. But I do get short stories in return, and I have every intention of reading them, so, I thought that I should probably include them. But I get one short story a month, or 12 for the year of 2021. And then the next category I have is books that I got from this secondhand website that I was a part of for the first part of 2021. I was a member from the beginning of the year until about February 14th, I believe. And then I haven't re-upped my membership since then, but in that time period, I did get 3 books from that website. And that means that I actually point blank purchased about 30 books from Bookstores. And so that feels honestly about right to me. That feels like what I did in the year. One thing you may note is that I don't have anything like subscription boxes, and that's because I don't actually subscribe to any subscription boxes. I don't have any subscription services as well, like Audible or Kindle Unlimited or anything like that. And that is because, again, I don't have those. Subscription boxes as well as subscription services aren't really things that I'm interested in at this point in time, primarily because I have such a good library system and what I read is frequently at the library. So I don't really feel a need for these subscription services or a specific subscription box. I just wanted to address that real quick. But to get into the actual amount of money that I spent in total for all 45 books, I spent $526.59, which averages out to about $11.70 per book. So to break that down even further, Patreon. So figuring out how much I spent at Patreon was a little bit complicated because, like I said, I primarily am supporting Shannon McGuire because I want her to continue to write, not because I really needed access to the short stories. But because I'm getting them, I still wanted to include some amount of money. So how I decided is that the first dollar of my pledge is I am saying that's for the short story, which makes sense because you only have to pledge $1 to get access to the short stories. And then the remaining amount of my pledge is just me supporting Shannon McGuire as an author. So because it is $1 per month going towards these short stories, that is a total of $12 for the year. And then likewise, somewhat complicated is how much money I spent on the books that I got from my secondhand website. Like I said, it's a membership. It's a website that requires membership. And I was just kind of waiting for my membership to wind down, right? But the membership fee I paid was in 2020. And so I didn't actually spend any additional money in 2021 to receive those 3 books. So I just went ahead and put this at $0, just to keep it across all the different categories in this video. It's basically, if I didn't spend any money on 2021 on it in 2021, then I'm counting it as 0. So I spent $0 at my secondhand website to procure those 3 books. So that means that the remaining 30 that I got from the bookstores, I spent a total of $514.59. And that works out to about $17.15 per book, which, like, I'm not gonna lie, when I figured out this per book average, I had a moment where I cried a little on the inside because that is high. That just feels really, really high. So I went ahead and dived into this number and really looked at, why is this so high? And really, one of the big things is shipping costs. So I did not actually go into any physical bookstores in 2021. Now, that's primarily because I don't have a good independent bookstore, and like I don't like going to Barnes and Noble because they never have the books I'm looking for, and because I only go to bookstores when I have a specific book I want to buy. That's really, really frustrating. And so I am online only. Additionally, there are certain companies that I do not want to support, like the Big River Company. And so I don't necessarily get free shipping because I'm primarily going through bookshop.org, which doesn't have free shipping. So I am spending money on shipping for the vast majority of my books. I actually looked at the shipping costs, which were included in my total costs, and that was $43.45, which is about 8% of my total cost of books. Now, I do include shipping in the total cost because that's how much I had to spend to get that book to me. I think that that should be included. But that is kind of a lot of money. It works out to about $1.45 per book, which is it's just like, that's kind of a lot, right? I looked at it and I think I can bring that number down a little bit in the year 2022 because I can combine orders a little bit more. But what I realized is that this is kind of just what it is. I have made certain choices about where I want to purchase books from. And one of the costs of doing that is that I do have to pay for shipping. But I did think it was just kind of interesting. And like I said, it brings up that total cost per book by almost $1.50. Additionally, another thing that is bringing this number up so high, this average cost per book so high, is that I don't really purchase ebooks. So of the 30 books I purchased, only 3 were ebooks, and only because I couldn't get them in physical form. And so I just don't generally like reading ebooks nearly as much as physical books. And frequently ebooks are at a lower price point than physical books. So because I'm getting primarily physical books, it does make that number higher. Additionally, I don't buy secondhand books. So here's the thing. I have nothing against secondhand books. That is how I survived for so long. I am totally on board with secondhand books. But for me, a lot of the things that I used to get secondhand, those are things that I'm now getting from the library. Because what I've found is if it's something that I want to keep on my shelves, I would like a nice copy of it. But I don't really want to have to go hunting at a local secondhand shop, nor do I really want to have fights with people online because we have differing ideas of quality of the book, right? I have certain standards, and that may or may not align with everybody else. And so I just generally kind of go the easier route and just purchase all new books. Additionally, I have the disposable income to do so. And so I really appreciate being able to support authors as well, especially since those are the books that I want to keep on my shelf. If I like them that much, I do want to support the author. But obviously that affects the total amount of money I'm spending and makes it much higher. Additionally, I only purchased 7 YA books out of a total of 30. Adult books just generally have a slightly higher price point. And the format that I'm choosing also tends to be higher. I only got 1 book that was a mass market paperback. The rest were trade paperbacks or hardcovers, which again, those tend to cost more. And then the last thing that really brought that number up is that I purchased 2 books from Subterranean Press. If you don't know Subterranean Press, they are a small independent publisher that focuses on doing beautiful, high quality books. and they predominantly do like do special editions of popular books. So they might do a beautiful copy of The Expanse or Leviathan Wakes by James S.A. Corey. And they're beautiful, they really are. But they also do some amount of original stories, and they're mostly novellas, but again, they're still high quality, they're still very beautiful, and they start at $40 per book, which is a lot of money, and that's why I only purchased two. And purchasing two still means that that's like $80 spent over two books. It's a lot, and it brings that average up. So that's kind of why my average is so high. I'm actually really okay with it because it makes sense, like why my average is higher. My preferences just kind of push it a little higher, but it was a little bit shocking when I first saw that number. So now, of course, as I looked at this, I was really curious. Okay, I purchased 45 things. Did I read them? And the answer is mostly, yeah. Of the 45 books, I read 26 of them, or about 58%. There is, like I said, one book that I unhauled without reading. And honestly, that one was because I got it from my secondhand website. It spurred me into rereading the first book in the series so that I could get to that second one that I had just hauled. But upon trying to reread the first one, I realized I hated it, DNF'd the first one, unhauled the second one. That's how that worked out. But then I did have an additional 18 books that I have not yet read. That equates to about 40%. Of those 18 books, 12 of them are Patreon short stories, which I have not gotten to because I'm really behind. I want to try to read them in order, and I just haven't done it yet. I'm like 5 years behind. It's a thing. And then of the remaining 6, 4 of those are pre-orders. I don't even have them in my hands. And 2 of them are actually sitting on my shelf waiting to be read. And then, of course, because I read 26 of them, I was really curious. Okay, how many of them did I actually enjoy? Am I spending my money on things that I end up wanting to keep on my shelf? And I can say overwhelmingly, I am. So of the 26 books that I read, there are 21 of them, or about 81%, that I rated 4 to 5 stars. And those are the books that I generally want to keep on my shelf. So 80% is really, really good for me. I am very, very happy with that number. Of the remaining 5, 1 of them I rated 3.5 stars, 1 of them I rated 2 stars, and 3 of them I DNF'd. Now, of the 3 that I DNF'd, I only spent actual money on like 1 of them, and not even that much, but I would like to get that number down a little bit for 2022. So that kind of wraps up how much I spent on books. And what I found is overall is that I am doing pretty well picking out books that I think I'm going to like to purchase, and my preferences mean that I may be purchasing fewer books in the future because they just tend to be a little bit more expensive. So getting into the books that I procured for free, that is, like I said, a total of 152 books. I found that they worked out to be in about 5 different categories. The first and largest category are books that I got from the library. I got 79 books, or about 52% of these free books, from the library. The next biggest category are books that I had on my TBR shelf prior to 2021. So I did maybe spend money previously, but I did not spend any money in 2021 on these books. And that was 22 books, or about 14%. The next largest category are books that I reread, and that was 21 books, or about 14%. And then the next largest category are books that I received as gifts, and that was 19 books, or about 13%. Gifts include everything from like birthdays and Christmas, or just random gifts from people. I pretty much only ask for books, so like I do tend to get more of them. And then the last category are books that I read like on loan from family members. I just borrowed it from a family member because they had it. And that was 11 books, or about 7% of what I read in 2021. So obviously some of these are things where somebody spent money at some time, like rereads and TBR shelves and those kind of things. But of the things that I did not ever spend money on, those are books from the library and books that I borrowed from family members, and that's a total of 90 books. And I was really curious to see how much money I saved by getting these books from the library or a family member. And so throughout the year, as I read these books, I looked up how much it would have cost me to purchase these books. I took the number from Amazon because even though I don't purchase from them, it has a really good average cost. And I did also try to match the format that I got from the library. But so of these 90 books, I saved $1,043.97, which is a lot of money. That's a lot of money that I saved just by going to my library, by borrowing books from my family. If you're curious, that does mean that I did save $926.09 getting books from the library specifically, and then an additional $117.88 from books that I borrowed from family members. And this like also kind of blew my mind. That is like, this makes me feel really good about how much I'm utilizing my library. And then the other thing that made me feel real good about how much I'm utilizing the library is I actually looked at, okay, I got all these books from the library. How many did I go on to want to purchase? And that was one book. One of the books that I checked out from the library was good enough that I was just like, actually, yeah, I do want that on my shelf, which is amazing, honestly. So it means that a lot of the things that I'm borrowing are things that maybe I wanted to read, but I didn't end up liking enough that I wanted to keep it. And those are exactly the kinds of books that I do want to be getting from the library or from family members. I will say that there's an additional like 15 books that I'm maybe going to purchase in the future. That's actually the 15 volumes of the manga series Library Wars. And it's just one of those I'm keeping on my radar because I have now reread it twice. I will probably reread it again in the future. And when I do reread it, I will want to stop and have the conversation with myself if it makes sense to purchase it. But still, 16 out of 90 books is really not bad. And then the other number that made me feel really comfortable with how much I'm getting from the library is I actually looked to see where my DNFs were coming from. So I DNF'd 44 books this year, and 23 of them came from the library. So again, that's a really good number. Like, that's a solid amount that I didn't pay for, which is great because I ended up not liking the books well enough to even finish them. Additionally, like, I did another that I didn't spend any money on. So I DNF'd one book that I borrowed from a family member, got on loan. So a total of 24 out of the 44 books I spent $0 on. Additionally, there were 7 DNFs that came from my physical TBR, and most of those were books that had been sitting on my shelf for so long that my tastes have since changed, and that's kind of why they're so high. I obviously have gotten those off my shelf now, and I don't foresee this being a large number in the future, which is great. And then additionally, there are 10 books that I went to reread this year that I ended up DNFing. That is also not surprising to me because I tried to there were a number of series that I decided that I was like, I'm going to finish that series, but it's been so long that I actually have to kind of restart it to kind of get a running lead into the books I haven't read. But then I would go back and reread like the first or maybe even get to the second book and be like, oh, I don't like this anymore. And just DNF it. And again, I'm actually really comfortable with that. I hope this number is lower in 2022, but also like it's getting the books off my shelf. And then, like I already mentioned, there were 3 books that I hauled that I ended up, DNFing. But interestingly, I did look at it, and of all the books that I DNF'd this year, I spent a total of 99 cents in 2021 on the books that I ended up DNFing. So I think that, again, that's really fantastic. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that I got so many of these books from the library. So to me, what this is telling me is that I'm actually doing pretty good picking out books to purchase that I think I'm going to like and want to keep on my shelf. And I'm also really good at figuring out which books I still want to read, but I'm probably not going to like nearly as much. And I get those books from the library. And the other thing that I really wanted to mention, before I close this up, is that one of the things about going to the library so much is that I feel really comfortable picking up books that I think are interesting and I have heard 0 things about, or things that I think might be interesting but are generally like outside of what I normally read, because I'm not going to spend any money on it. It's not like I spent money and and then I would feel so bad DNFing it or something. It's like, I got it from the library. Who cares if I DNF it? And so this has led me to, there were definitely things I picked up from the library on a whim that ended up being not good. I DNF'd it, whatever. But there were some things that I actually ended up really liking. One of the surprising books I had of the year was Unity by Ellie Bangs. And that was a book that I picked up on a whim from my library. And so I think that that's also an important number to talk about as well, an important thing to talk about as well. Because I'm getting so many books from my library, I'm okay trying a wide variety of things because I didn't have to spend money to procure it. So that's it. Those are all the numbers for my year. Obviously, like I said, I would love to have a conversation about this. If you have any thoughts or feelings about my numbers, if you want to talk your numbers, I would be very, very interested. Please leave me a comment down below. But that's all I have. So if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you want to. And until next time, have happy reading, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.